So the Tennessee Code annotated section 68.1.114 requires that the Tennessee Department of Health issue a monthly statement of all disciplinary actions. So I was able to go online and see disciplinary statements for all sorts of professions, for pharmacy, nursing, a lot of other ones. And there was one, of course, from the Board of Professional Counselors, MFTs, and Clinical Pastoral Therapists. And so I went and looked at all the disciplinary statements from 2018, 2019, and 2020. So that's 2.5 years of disciplinary statements. And I only found 7 cases for professional counselors here in Tennessee, which, that's actually a lot less than I thought. And I found that 4 out of 7 of the cases in the past 2.5 years had to do with sexual, romantic, or unprofessional relationships with a client or a former client. Actually, there are statistics from Tennessee Legal that say that sexual misconduct with adult clients is the #1 ethical complaint filed with the APA, and this seems to hold true here. Most of them were sexual misconduct or sexual relationship. And I think one of them said it was just an unprofessional relationship, but it didn't really state what that meant. But yeah, I was actually pretty surprised to see that was the case, since the ACA Code of Ethics is so blatant on its stance on sexual romantic relationships with clients and former clients. And even though technically you can have a relationship with a client after 5 years of professional contact, it's still not a good idea. So I did find that surprising that was more than half of the cases. But the other reasons that I found were a failure to renew license, so somebody was practicing without a current license, failure to report that the parent of a minor client was driving them to the sessions while intoxicated, and then another was giving a professional opinion regarding mental status to someone who was not a client and without giving a proper assessment. But yeah, I found those very interesting. The most current one that I found was from June 2020. The July one isn't up yet. But that one was covering professional misconduct. Someone was disciplined for having asexual romantic interactions with a former client prior to the 5 years following the last professional contact. And like I said, the ACA Code of Ethics is pretty clear, and there's a whole, Section A5 is all about prohibited non-counseling roles and relationships, and A5C of the ACA Code of Ethics 2014 pertains to this exact scenario, and it states sexual and or romantic counselor-client relationships and interactions with former clients, their romantic partners, and their family members are all prohibited for a period of 5 years following the last professional contact. And this prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic contact with that person. So the Tennessee Code is the exact same. They were actually disciplined because it was not after the 5-year period. So the Tennessee Code just relies a lot on the ACA Code of Ethics for this scenario. The outcome for board discipline was that the license for this particular person was placed on probation, and they had to be placed on monitor, and they had to submit monthly reports to the disciplinary coordination. So they were very heavily monitored and had to kind of be micromanaged a little bit. But I'm actually surprised the license wasn't revoked, but I do wonder if that's a case by case, what the relationship looked like. Was it 4 years after the last professional contact, or was it just a month? I think those things probably come into play a little bit too. The ACA Code of Ethics states when it comes to counselor impairment, is that counselors monitor themselves for signs of impairment for their own physical, mental, or emotional problems, and refrain from offering or providing professional services when impaired. And they need to seek assistance and help when they realize that they are impaired, and maybe even limit or terminate or suspend their practice or practicing until they're able to work again. And we as counselors will have a responsibility to help our colleagues as well when we notice somebody might be distressed or in need of, taking a step back from their job, if it's harming counselors, and everything that I saw when it came to somebody getting disciplined in their profession, it all had to do with harming the client. Everything they did harmed the client. And it did other things as well. Practicing without a license is lying to your client. That's, important. But lying to your client is also harming your client. So all of these things involve harming a client. Working while you're impaired involves harming a client. And so we as counselors just need to make sure that we're doing our best to do no harm and to not harm clients. And if that means taking a step back or going over our codes of ethics for our states and ACA code of ethics frequently in order to make sure we're, doing our best to promote client welfare, then we need to do that because that's our responsibility as counselors. So, yeah, thanks.